Well, I had this friend in high school, and I won't say his name, but he was beautiful. I mean, just an absolute specimen. He looked like a male model because he was a male model. Like, legitimately, he did those, like, pageant things. Anyway, I didn't look like a male model at the time. I looked like a giraffe with acne, but we were still friends. This dude had big muscles. I did not. He had great teeth, flowing locks of hair, and he was always telling me about these amazing dates he was going on with all these girls that I like secretly wished I could be going on dates with. But then I would always say stuff like, "It's cool though. Good for you. That's awesome." You know, things like that, like we do. He did not have a job in high school, so he could focus on school more. As if I didn't need to focus on school more, but, you know, he had no job. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there slinging birds at the Golden Chick to save up enough money to buy my own 1997 Ford Escort station wagon. Wow, what did his parents do? They bought him a car. Did he have a... No, they bought him a car. Old car? No, new car. Ford Mustang, the latest model. I mean, it was nice. He always had the nicest game consoles and the nicest dirt bikes. We rode dirt bikes together, and he always had the nicest clothes and everything. Your boy was shopping thrift. And even in shopping thrift, I would be sometimes looking for that 5-finger discount. You know what I'm talking about? But literally everything he had was better than anything I had. And the crazy thing is, like, it wasn't his fault. Like, he never rubbed it in. He wasn't a jerk about it. Like, his family just had more money than my family, and we just had different lives, and that's okay. But it didn't feel okay at the time. What it felt was unfair. And I don't know where we got this idea that life should be fair or that it would be fair, but it's just like, I'll prepare you for this right now, just like the heads up. It's not. Like, it's not, and it's not gonna be. So stop expecting it to, because you'll be disappointed every time. But I didn't realize it, though I was mad, like, at him at the time. I didn't know why. But as I look back, and I think at the core, the reason was because I was dealing with something that low-key I still struggle with today, and I think we all do, and it's jealousy. The struggle is jealousy. I was in this fight of jealousy at the time, and I would bet money that a lot of us are in this same fight today. And isn't it weird how when we're jealous or we have envy, like we want something that somebody else has, or we want to look like somebody else looks, or have the personality of somebody else, or the family of somebody else, or the life of somebody else, like when that starts to really creep in, it's weird how we can grow to dislike and despise and resent and almost even like hate that person, the person that we're jealous of. And maybe you know somebody like this. Maybe you have a friend like this, right? And maybe you know them online. You follow an account like this that you just look at and you're like, dang, I wish this. They seem to have this perfect, unbroken family. Their parents, they just seem to show up at all of their events, at all of their games. They're healthy. Like, they're never sick. Meanwhile, you're struggling with something, these issues that nobody can understand. There's this person, they can be confident in a crowded room and just go right up to somebody with all of the confidence in the world and start up conversations with random strangers. Meanwhile, you struggle to even speak up in class and ask a question. You'll just like, guess, I don't know, right? There might be a friend you have like that, and suddenly, you know, like the anger starts to creep in, and these people can start to become the source of our unhappy feelings. Why we don't feel good enough because we feel like they're so much better. And every time we see them in person or online, it's a reminder that we don't stack up. Our lives don't stack up. We're not as good. We're not good at all. And eventually they become the target of our anger. And we're going to look at what to do when that happens tonight. So the first part of what do we do as we go to God's word. So if you have a Bible, open it up to 1 Samuel chapter 17, because we're going to be in 1 Samuel tonight. I like 1 Samuel because it's where we find this story that I'm sure most of us are familiar with. It's the story of David and Goliath. But we're not going to be talking about David and Goliath so much. We're going to be talking about what was going on around the story of David and Goliath. Like if you want to learn about David and Goliath, go watch VeggieTales or something like that. But do you know who the king of Israel was at the time that this showdown happened between David and Goliath? The king of Israel at the time, his name was Saul, and he was actually the first king of Israel, but he was a generally respected guy. He was a good dude, and he had the respect of his kingdom, the people of Israel. He was a generous person, and he was known for being very courageous in battle. Literally in chapter 9 of 1 Samuel, it just goes on and on about Saul and how handsome and good looking he was, and how just much of a specimen he was, and how just like buff and tall. It was like said he's so tall, and like tall, dark, handsome. Like there was this guy Saul, he had it all. Hey, that rhymed. But he was like the guy that all the guys wanted to be, and he was the guy all the girls wanted to be with. He was the one, the only, the Saul, the first king of Israel, the epic leader of battle. And one day this epic battle of all battles is about to go down between Saul's people, Israel, and a different people group, the Philistines, right? And so they're about to do this thing, and the Philistines, they have a secret weapon. So in 1 Samuel 17, starting in verse 4, we'll read on. It says, a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. So he's coming. And his height was 6 cubits and a span, which a cubit was a unit of measurement at the time. 6 cubits and a span would equate to about 9 feet, 9 inches today. So basically Josh Parkhurst is just coming out of the Philistine camp. He's coming at Israel. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels, which is equivalent to about 125 pounds. Some of y'all don't even weigh 125 pounds. That's how much his armor alone weighed. So this person was not just tall, but he was like big too. He was huge. He was a giant, and he was a champion. He was known for just crushing people. That was his reputation. And here comes this pipsqueak David to represent Israel, or at least he wants to. And he goes up to Saul, the king of Israel. Philistines got Goliath. Now Israel's like, how do we respond to this? What do we do? I need somebody. And here he comes, right? Little guy David, shepherd boy, small, young. He says to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of that dang Philistine, your servant, me. I'm here to serve you. I am going to go out there. I'm going to fight him. And Saul replied, you're not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. Are you crazy? You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. Like, you're going to die. And David is like very convincing, and he just won't let go. So eventually Saul is like, okay, bro, like if you want to go, like you can go. It's your funeral. And David's like, bet. So he goes. And then in verse 48, the Philistine moved, that's Goliath, moved closer to attack him. That's David. David ran quickly toward the battle. What kind of psycho runs toward battle? But he runs up to meet him, reaching into his bag, taking out a stone. He struck the Philistine right on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead. That's nasty. And Goliath fell face down onto the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Killed him. As you can imagine, the party was crazy. Israel went absolutely ballistic, and David got immediately insta-famous. I mean, he started climbing up fast. Everybody loved him. Saul even promoted him again and again and again, and David delivered again and again and again. In the very next chapter, 1 Samuel 18, it says, whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army, and this pleased the troops and Saul's officers as well. So everything is great. Saul is happy. David is a beast. The whole nation, the whole kingdom of Israel is like, woohoo! Like, we're just like kicking butt, taking names. And then look in verse 7, as they danced, they sang in celebration. Saul has slain his thousands, and David has slain his 10,000s. You can imagine Saul hearing them dancing and singing like, wait, hold up, what? Saul has, I've slayed my thousands, and David Humma, what now? Slayed his 10,000s? And the comparison starts happening. People were comparing these two guys, and now Saul is comparing himself with David and realizing he's not being recognized as much as the person that he put in power. Introducing salty Saul. I think that's actually where it came from. You're salty. And he was, because look in verse 8. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. I'm greatly displeased, he said. They have credited David with tens of thousands? He thought. Isn't it interesting that God knows his thoughts? But anyway, they've credited David with tens of thousands and me only thousands? What more can he get but the kingdom? He's going to come after the throne next. I'm the king. And he feels threatened. And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. Saul is not Nick Jonas, but he still gets jealous. Saul is not Smuckers, but he is straight jelly. Saul was letting envy creep into his heart, and he crept away from his friendship. He had created some distance now between him and David. Verse 15, when Saul saw how successful David was, he was afraid of him. He was intimidated by the success of his friend, his battle buddy, the one with whom he went through thick and thin. When he saw success, Saul had a choice. He could have celebrated with David. He could have applauded David. He could have danced with and for David, saying like, man, great job. Like, you passed me up. And that's my dream, that you guys would pass me up, that you would do even greater ministry, that you would have even more beautiful, amazing, loving families. But not Saul. He was too busy being salty. He got angry and he literally devoted the majority of the rest of his life to trying to find David and kill him. He felt so threatened by his success that he might come for the throne that he wanted to kill David and just put it into it. And today, guys, like, we obsess over people too. Whether it's a person and we're just looking at them, or we see them and we hear them and we know who they are, or we see them on social media, right? And we become obsessed with this person and like who they're hanging out with, who they're talking to, what their grades are, how successful they are in their sport or whatever. Like, what are their families look like? What are their relationships with their siblings look like and their parents and stuff? We become so obsessed with these people, and sometimes, like, we don't want them to do well. We're looking for a flaw. We want to see something wrong. We zoom in on all the pictures so we can see something in the background and make fun of it because it makes us feel better about ourselves. We obsess over people when we should obsess over Jesus. We can get so focused on their fame and not focused on our Father. I wonder, where has your focus been lately? Who have you been focusing on lately? Who have you been obsessed with lately? Who have you been paying attention to? God or the gram? Where is your attention going to? God or that girl? Last week we looked at a proverb, and I like looking at Proverbs. I want to do it again. Proverbs 14, verse 30. And like I said, Solomon wrote Proverbs, wisest man ever. So listen up. He says, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. So we're talking about peace. We want peace in our hearts. Who came to bring peace? Who is the Prince of Peace? His name is Jesus. This is what he brings. Like, he's the only true source of like perfect peace. And when he's in your heart, guys, it says it'll give life to your body, as opposed to envy or jealousy. Wanting what somebody else has rots the bones. Jealousy of a friend can destroy or rot or ruin us. You know, there's this country song. It says, if the bones are good, the rest don't matter. Like the paint could peel, the glass could shatter, right? And it's like, you know, the whole thing could just be janky, but if the bones of the house are good, it won't fall down, right? But listen, envy, jealousy rots the bones. If the bones are rotten, the whole thing is coming crumbling down. Jealousy can destroy the house of your friendship. Jealousy can cause us to doubt our own talents. It can cause us to doubt our own achievements and our own success when you are wonderfully made. You are beautifully crafted by God on purpose, for a purpose, just how you are. And guess what? So are they. So are they. But when we're going to spend all of our time focused on them and not God, on the creation rather than the creator, comparing ourselves, which there's no win in, by the way, it's rotting how we feel about them. Another one of God's beautiful creation, who he created on purpose and for a purpose, but it also rots how we feel about ourselves because we are feeling inadequate, less than, or prideful because we're more than, or whatever. Jealousy can kill our sense of peace, and peace is what brings life, because Jesus, who was peace, is the way, the truth, and the life. So what do we do? Before we get to it, I just want to shout out a fun fact. Solomon, who wrote Proverbs, do you know who he was? He was David's son. Isn't that cool? Solomon gave us this advice to not have jealousy in our hearts, this rotting, infectious jealousy, but rather have peace, because he saw his dad, David, the shepherd boy who became a king, the one who is after God's own heart. David, who defeated Goliath. He saw how this jealousy ruined that relationship with him and Saul. And then years later, David has a son, Solomon, who would grow up and write the book of Proverbs. And so he saw it firsthand. It's true, guys. It's true. So how do we fight it? How do we fight envy, and how do we fight jealousy? And honestly, it's simple. Well, it's easy to say, harder to do, but it's celebrate others. Celebrate others. When envy and jealousy starts to creep in on about a friend, or it could be someone you don't even know, it could be someone on social media, be happy for them. Truly, just say, like, that's amazing that you are able to do that, and celebrate what they are able to do. Celebrate who they are and how God made them. And just be happy for them, like truly and genuinely celebrate them. And you will discover it feels a lot better to champion what God is doing in other people's lives. And you're also going to feel better about yourself too. You're not going to be so critical of others. You won't be so critical of yourself. If you're just seeing the good and celebrating what God's doing, you will see the good and celebrate what God's doing in you also. So celebrate other people. The bottom line for tonight is, the more I celebrate others, the more I like me. And we're in a series called Like Me. And I don't know about you, but I want to like me. I want to look in the mirror and like what I see. I want to look on my news, on my grid, on my socials, and like what I see and be proud of what God's doing. Like, don't you? I want to look back through my texts. I want to look back through my thoughts. If only we could, right? And be proud of what we see. Wouldn't that be cool? It starts with celebrating others. And listen, like, if you struggle with jealousy, that's normal and it's okay. Like, God knows. He's not surprised that you're jealous, that we struggle with this, but he knows that it can hurt your relationships, and he knows that it can hurt you when we spend all this time that could be spent loving others, jealous of others instead, which is why he wants to set you free from it. So, in what areas are you feeling jealous? Who are you jealous of, and why? What do they have that you think you want so badly? And can that need be met in Jesus? Can you actually celebrate what they have instead and just see what God does with that? I wonder if we can try that this week, to take celebration over saltiness.